that's muzzle flash. And I said it out loud. That's muzzle flash. And he's like, where? And I'm like, and I got on the radio with the friendlies. I was like, confirm you have no friendlies on the opposite side. Just confirm there's no friendlies over on the opposite side. He's like, no, there's no friendlies. Doug's like, shoot it. And so I just slewed the 30 to me and I started shooting the muzzle flash. Once I shot that, then we could hit rockets and all these other things too. But the powerful part of that was I'd shot that gun many times up to that point, but it was at targets, right? That was the first time where I knew when I squeezed that trigger, while the trigger felt the same physically, it felt different because I squeezed that trigger and people went away.
Welcome to Combat Story. I'm Ryan Fugit, and I served Warzone tours as an Army attack helicopter pilot and CIA officer over a 15-year career. I'm fascinated by the experiences of the elite in combat. On this show, I interview some of the best to understand what combat felt like on their front lines. This is Combat Story. Today we hear the combat story of Brian Slade, former AH-64 Apache pilot and serving Air Force combat search and rescue pilot, with multiple combat deployments, both taking and saving lives. Brian moved out of his house at the age of 15 and learned to make it on his own, and carries the same conviction and passion in almost everything he does today. He's written a book called Cleared Hot: Lessons Learned About Life, Love, and Leadership While Flying the Apache Gunship in Afghanistan, and Why I Believe a Prepared Mind Can Help Minimize PTSD, that goes into greater detail about his combat experiences. Brian showed me the gun tape from inside his cockpit after his front seater was shot in the leg. He lost an engine and lost flight controls, and it was amazing, bringing back the feel of the aircraft and the borderline chaos of radios during a gunfight, and this is one of the experiences we touch on in this episode. We also spend time in this episode on how to remove the weight and burden of what Brian aptly calls the insidious backpack that many of us carry from experiences downrange or just at home, which is part of a larger effort he's supporting called Trauma to Triumph to help others deal with this burden. Brian and I definitely geek out on aviation lingo, aircraft flight profiles, and emergency procedures, and I hope you enjoy this discussion of chaos in the air and overcoming the associated burdens on the ground as much as I did. Ryan, thanks for taking the time to share your story with us today.
Ryan, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Man, we do not get many Apache drivers on this show, and I'm so glad to have another one here. And I know you went on to fly with the Air Force as well, and we'll get into all of that. But I would just say it's good to have another 64 driver on the scene.
Yeah, what's wrong? Why don't we have more? We need more on here.
All right, man. And I do love the name of your book, Cleared Hot. It's just great stuff, man. It's such a good name for the worlds we came from. So I wanted to get started with something as I was prepping for this, learning more about your background and some of the difficulty, to put it lightly, that you had in high school. And I was hoping we could start there because I think it sets the path for the entrepreneurial person you become.
Yeah, let's start where all good things start, and that's high school, right? Yeah, so in high school, I'm one of eight kids. So the eldest of eight kids, which I like to say eldest because it sounds more distinguished, but not a lot of what I've done has been distinguished. My family was very religious growing up, and I was I wouldn't say a hellraiser, but I was one of those kids that liked to get into things a little bit. And so because of that, I moved out of my house at 15. And it was a mutual agreement between me and my parents that either I obey the rules, or I go to juvie, or I move out on my own. So I picked non-cell life and moved out. But I did continue to go to high school. School is still important to me. I saw it, even though I was never super scholastically, it wasn't something that excited me, but I understood that it had value. I also understood that the relationships and the sporting events that I participated in were things that really gave me joy. And so I wanted to maintain that. So I continued to go to high school at 15. I didn't drop out. I continued to carry a job so I could pay for rent. And then I continued to play sports as well, except for the last 6 months when my roommates were evicted. I had roommates that were above the age of 18, and then I just kind of paid rent, and they got evicted, which means I got evicted. And in the last 6 months of my school senior year, I actually lived in my Chevy 1977 Custom Deluxe truck,
Dude, no.
which in Idaho in the winter is pretty cold. So But it was an adventure. That's how I saw it. But I learned a lot of lessons during high school that formed the decision making I would use in the military and the decision making I would use in many other facets of my life moving forward. Most of those came from sports. You know, I think educators don't like me to say this, but I learned more from sports on how to be successful in life than any class I took. So,
What parts of sports would you say did that?
well, I played every sport out there really, except for, golf, which is that a
Questionable sport.
right? Yeah. 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 My brother gets after me because he wants me to take it up, but I haven't yet. And I'm in the Air Force and I haven't taken up golf. So go figure.
Yeah.
And in business and still haven't taken up golf. But the one I learned the most from was football. I would have to say it was football. And I had a particular coach who really taught me some pretty valuable lessons. And I loved the idea of football, and I never played it till I was a sophomore. Like I just loved it and wanted to play it. My mom wouldn't let me play it, but when I moved out of the house, I could play it, right? So I started playing it, and initially I sucked, right? Because I had never played it, but I was overly competitive, a very competitive person. I'm not so crazy about that now. Like, I used to make everything a competition. The guy that's like, let's race here, let's race there. And, board games can just be board games. They don't have to be intense, right? But for a while, that's kind of how I was. And so I pushed and I pushed, and I actually ended up getting pretty good at football because I was a naturally strong kid because I grew up on a farm, carrying water irrigation lines and doing all that kind of stuff. So I was naturally pretty strong and tough that way, and that lends itself to being good at football. And then this coach that I had would tell us, if you guys show me commitment, I don't care how good you are. You show me commitment and you engage with courage. If you show me commitment and engage with courage, you will get the capability. You will acquire that capability that that you don't have right now. And that stuck with me. I was like, because I was frustrated that I just wasn't good at it. I was like, I could knock that guy over, but I can't get to him, right? So I had to figure out these things, just little things on how to accomplish the end mission. And he just gave me a recipe. Engage with courage and commitment, and you will gain that capability. And so I took that to heart. And every practice, every game, I just gave it everything I got. At the end of practice, I was spent. When we were doing sprints, I didn't do a half sprint to catch up for the next one. I sprinted every freaking time and then puked and then sprinted again. Right. And it worked. I got better and better. And there was one particular game that I put in the book because it was a lesson that I applied as a lesson. I'm not sure this is how he wanted me to apply it, but this is how I applied it. I was playing on defense. A guy runs right up the middle, and I see him, and I run, lower shoulder, get ready, perfect lineup, drive the shoulder into him, legs pumping, feels good. All of a sudden, crunch from the other side. My other teammate tackled him from the other side. My arms weren't all the way around him, and my middle finger on my left hand got shoved all the way back into my left hand. Now, people are like, in your hand? What do you mean? And yes, into my hand, to where I didn't think I had a finger. I thought I got ripped off, right? Not immediately because I didn't look at it. When it happened, it hurt. And I was just like, walk it off. Don't look at it. It's not there, that kind of thing. And I went to get lined up for the next down, in fact, without looking at my hand. And when I went to put my hand on the ground, there was no return pressure from my middle finger. And I looked down, and from what I saw, it was missing because there's just blood and skin and all that kind of stuff where it should be. And I was like, oh, crap, I don't have a finger, And but that point we're in the play where the play's going and the whistle goes, and I actually make the tackle, which is awesome. Later, when we went through the film study, they're like, wait, you what? Now, and I made the tackle on that next play. But then when I came out, I tapping my helmet. And my coach is standing there. He actually got mad at me because at this point I'd gotten pretty good. Like I said, I never left the field. I was on all special teams. I was on offense. I was on defense. When the game started, I never left the field. And I had the stamina to do it because I sprinted every sprint, right? I did that commitment part, the courage commitment part that he was talking about. And so he's like, what the hell are you coming off for? And I'm like, coach, I'm not sure, but this doesn't look right, and like show my hand. And he's like, oh crap. And then one of the guys is like, stop the game. We got to find a finger. And so I stood over to the sideline. I'm holding my hand, and the assistant coach is looking at it, and I'm just kind of a little dizzy, and I'm kind of holding it. And he's like, I think your finger's in your hand. And I'm like, what? And look at it. And he's like, see your fingernail poking out, right there. I'm like, oh, I can see a fingernail. And so he was just pull on it. And so I reached in with my good hand, grabbed it and pulled, and it just slid out, just like I grew up on a farm.
You did this?
I did it. Yes. And
Right
pulled
on.
it out. And, I grew up on a farm. It's like a baby giving birth, right? Slimy, it just comes out, right? I mean, not a baby, an animal giving birth. Sorry. Slides out. And then I really started to like do the little, the dance, the bobblehead dance. And he's like, you good? And grabs my arm. And I'm like, yeah, didn't know my finger was in there, And what happened, my hand had been broken. It broke it, and the bones folded up on top of each other, and then the finger went inside. So there was when I pulled it, it kind of lined everything back up. And even the bone that was shoved up came back more or less where it should go. And but then this is a testament to how times have changed. We went in at halftime. This was in the second quarter. We went at halftime, and my hand looks like a freaking baseball mitt. There's just like a Cabbage Patch Kid hand, you know what I'm saying? And
just swollen.
Just swollen, like black already black and blue, like tight. We got ice on it, of course, but what's that doing? Nothing. And my coach is like, well, you think you can go? And I'm like, that wouldn't happen now. I don't think that would happen now. Right. They just sign a waiver, whatever. And I was like, yeah, courage, commitment. I'm like, yes, this is where I do it. This is where you get tested. I can do it when I'm healthy. Now can I do it when I'm hurt? And so that's what I was thinking. And we taped up that finger and wrapped up the hand. And I played the second half. And then, ended up getting it x-rayed later that week. And it is broken everything. And actually put a cast on the hand because they said you could play with the cast, which was awesome because it became like a weapon.
That's right.
And then they're like, you can't play with the cast because you're using it as a weapon. And so I took a Dremel tool and I cut off the cast. And then it burned my hand up pretty good trying to do it. And keep in mind, I don't live at home, so there's no parent to say, what the hell are you doing? Right. So then we padded it up, and I was going to go play without a cast. And my coach is like, we got to get your parent's signature at this point. Now, that's where times have changed. I never would have been given the option to go in now.
No.
Right?
No.
But now, we could cast, you're good. Okay. Well, now we need maybe a parent. I'm like, I'm emancipated. I don't live at home. And I wasn't emancipated. I just didn't live at home. And he's like, no, I that's where he drew the line, right? We need a signature.
Yeah.
So I went to my dad because even though I was kicked out of the home, it was like, I wasn't joking when I said it was a mutual agreement. I maintained a relationship with my parents. Like I did not hold a grudge against them. I didn't have any anger. In fact, I'd go visit, play with my siblings, all those kind of things. I just didn't live at home. Right. And so I went to him. I'm like, Dad, my hand's broken and they won't let me play with it. Will you sign this? And so my dad writes a note, and he says, my son has my permission to be an idiot and play with a broken hand. Larry Slade. Right. Yes. And so I bring the note to my coach, who reads it and just belly laughs for I don't know how long, and frames it and puts it in his office because it was that.
Because how often do you get that?
Yeah. And so I played the rest of the season. Had all state honors, ended up getting scholarship offers, all that kind of stuff. And, but that's where the lessons he taught me: courage, commitment, increase your capability. Did he mean play with a finger shoved inside your hand? I don't know. Probably not. But the lessons he drove home as a coach, as an instructor, as a team orchestrator really started when I rolled back out there with a busted finger and taped up and padded hand. What do you think my teammates thought?
Yeah.
I mean, I know what they thought because they said it. Like, dude, if you freaking can do this, it motivates me. I'm gonna. And so if you lead with intensity and never ask somebody to do something you're not willing to do yourself, you're compelling them to follow, not by force. You're not compelling them. They're compelling themselves because they feel that desire. They're like, holy crap, let's do that. And so that's a lesson. That's one lesson I learned through sports that would absolutely apply in combat.
Yeah, for sure. And I got to share. So I also played football in high school, and then I went to college at Georgetown, and I played there. It's an 1AA, not nothing big. In the off season one year, we were lifting in the weight room. It was me, I was a tight end, and another linebacker, and then next to us were two O linemen lifting. It was just us in the weight room, and then we're benching, and these guys next to us, they're doing bench, and the guy like doing a lot of weight. He pushes it up, and then he asks for help, and the spotter racks it and catches the dude's pinky in the rack between the bar and the rack, and his finger popped off. His pinky fell onto the ground, and it was chaos in there. Yeah. So when I was hearing about this, like this football injury, like I've not seen what you described, but it made me immediately think of looking for a finger on the ground, like how unusual that is. I have to imagine people were on the field, as you said, like checking out, where's the play at? Is there a finger sitting here somewhere?
Yeah, they were. They were. And it's funny because when we did the interview for the book, because I wrote this in the book, I did an interview with my coach. And I'm like, look, I know memories can like change over time, right? I know that happens. I was like, before I preface this story with anything and tell this story, you tell it from what you remember, right? And I'd already told Mike Hirsch, the co-author with me on this book, my version of the story, right? And coach collaborated everything.
That's great.
Like,
I always love it when that happens.
Yeah, and I was a little bit,
yeah,
maybe not, and in some of these engagements that we put into this book, it's interesting. Guys remember things in different ways, and a lot of times they would remember things I didn't. A lot of times they remember things different than I did. We have gun tapes too that we could go back to, and journals and all those kind of things. And it's interesting, guys would even go back to their journals in preparation for the interview that I would talk to them with. And like, man, for this whole time, I thought it was this way. And now I read it, and it was this way, right? And so
it's crazy.
Our memories do things.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. Okay. I wanted to ask, because that sounds like an incredibly challenging high school experience, and you make it sound fairly easy. Did your coach become like a father figure? Did you look to your father still because it was an amicable kind of split there?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm trying to figure out, like, who did you look to as that father figure growing up with that experience in high school?
I think all of us have multiple father figures, whether we want to admit it or not, right? For good or bad. We have examples that we will choose maybe consciously, subconsciously to pattern certain things after. So I was actually having this discussion with my girlfriend the other night. I was like, even though I moved out of my house at 15, I would say, and I have this special relationship. I feel like I have a special relationship with my mom. She's one of the few people that I'll do certain things for, that I won't compromise these things for other people, but I will for her, right? Just because of who she is to me, right? Mm-hmm. And that's always been the case. I would say my relationship with my mom's always been a little bit closer than that with my dad. In fact, now that I've moved out of the home and we've talked, and I still have a great relationship with my family, and my parents have talked about that incident. Now, my mom, she said immediately, she's like, I pulled him in the room right after he gave you that ultimatum, and I was like, you got to take it back. You got to take that ultimatum back, because he will leave and he will not come back, and she's like, that is just, he's like, when she tells this story, she's like, if you don't believe that, you don't know your son. Right.
Yeah.
And he's like, nah, he won't leave. But I think he partially was like, crap, what did I do? Because at the end of the week, he gave me a week to decide. At the end of the week, the whole week, I was just packing my things up in my room and getting ready and everything. And he didn't know that. and trying to line up a place to stay, all that. And the end of the week, I hadn't changed anything. And one of the ultimatums is like, you're going to obey our rules or, whatever. And I didn't change anything. I still went when I wanted to go, came back when I wanted to come back, anything. And he's like, well, it looks like you've chose to keep our rules because you haven't done any, been great this week. And I hadn't changed anything. And I think that was like his way of saying, I made a mistake, please stay. Right.
Yeah.
But I was like, nope, I'm packed. I'm ready to go. But long way to answer your question. I did continue to learn from him through those years. I mean, my dad was still, even though I have this special relationship with my mom, I think from like 14 to 18, my dad probably had more impact on the man I would be than my mom did. Now, from up until that point, I think my mom did, to be honest. And then my coach that we're talking about, I just had a podcast yesterday, or actually it was earlier this morning, sorry, where we talked about he was in my life for 2 years. For 2 years during football season and some off-season stuff, right? And to this day, I attack certain things based off of lessons learned through his coaching tutelage, right? So that's powerful to anybody listening who is a father, who is a coach, who is a teacher, who is anything like that, because you may have minimal face time with somebody and maximum impact. So in some ways, he impacted me more with combat and with military stuff than my own dad did,
Yeah. So, and we'll get to the trauma to triumph kind of progression. And I know a lot of this will come from combat, but just wanted to touch on, does some of the trauma that you're going to work on later in your life, Brian, does it come from that experience living on your own at that age?
I never saw it as traumatic, to be honest. I saw it as an adventure.
Yeah.
Wow. I saw it as an adventure. And I actually saw it as, how cool is this? I get to prove I can do this shit. Right. So I never held a grudge with my dad, honestly. Like, my dad was a heavy-handed individual when I was younger. And I probably took the brunt of that because I was that kid that would, push into it. And interestingly enough, and my dad, to his credit, years later, came with all to the whole family and was like, I wasn't always perfect as a dad. These are the ways that I really felt I messed up, and I would like to ask forgiveness,
Wow. Yeah, that's huge.
And the interesting thing is, when he said that, it was a big weight off of the shoulders of a lot of my siblings. They're like, okay, yeah, okay. For me, I was like, I don't think I need it. I think I always had forgiven you. Like, I always knew that you're not perfect. I'm not perfect, so why would you be, And so I didn't have anything I had to let go regarding that. I don't think. I mean, you never know. Like, sometimes there's this insidious rucksack every once in a while. You're like, I'm not carrying it. And then once it's off, and we can talk about another experience where I do have an experience with that. But once it's off, then you're like, oh crap, I was carrying that whole time. I didn't even realize it, So no, I don't think I have anything residual really from that. I'm grateful for it.
Wow. Super interesting and powerful. So we'll get to the insidious rucksack. I love that phrase. But I also wanted to ask, and it's no surprise that I think that you end up in the military, given the way you're talking about your experience, but what is the catalyst for you to go that route?
Why did I end up in the military?
Yeah.
I mentioned I was one of 8 and my dad was a teacher, right? So yeah, there's no school being paid for by my family. So I'll be remiss to say that wasn't a factor. That was a factor, right? I did have some football scholarship stuff, but I chose to do a 2-year church mission in Brazil and lost that scholarship stuff when I was gone and came back. And so, I started looking at ways. I was still going to play football. I ended up playing at Utah State. When I say play, roughly, that is D1. So I was good enough to sit on the bench.
Yep. Hey, man, I hear you.
but but anyway, like in that it wasn't paying for much is what I'm saying for football
Yeah.
wasn't at that point. And I looked around and I was like, what's my temperament? What's going to fit me? What's going to make me have a fulfillment in my life and what also meets these other needs. And I saw it as there's three needs. I had an adrenaline need. I was a whitewater river guide in college. That's what I was doing in the Grand Canyon, which is awesome whitewater, by the way. So if anybody does that, it's bigger than anything else in the US.
Wow.
Just so it's intense and it's awesome. Plug for Grand Canyon. Hashtag whatever. So that was a need for me. I needed that kind of engagement, the sports, the kinetic, the whatever. I needed that. I was patriotic before I even knew that this was the greatest nation on earth by comparing it to all the other nations by being there. I already believed it, right? And then I went and saw the world, and I'm like, oh, I was right. That's true. We are the greatest nation. But I already had that patriotism, so it filled that too. Sense of purpose, honorable mission, something you can get behind, adrenaline fix, and it pays for school.
Yep.
So I was enlisted for 8 years. I did the 7 years. I always can't remember, 7 or 8 years. I was an E6 select, and then I did the cadet thing and was an ROTC, and then came out a commissioned officer on the backside, and then flew Apaches.
What was your MOS on the enlisted side?
A 62 Bravo, which is a heavy wheel engineered diesel mechanic. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why the Apache or the flight transition?
So my plan was never to be a diesel mechanic. All right. So what I did is said, what has the biggest bonus? Because I'm only going to do this
as young men do.
Yeah. Well, I'm only going to do this for a short stint. And what's a skill set that I lack, that I'm not that great at, that I would enjoy knowing more about, that I think would be useful? And diesel mechanic was what I felt. So I did that with the intention of eventually being a pilot anyway. Right. So that was the end game to begin with. Because I got an incentive ride in a helicopter, a Black Hawk, where they tried to do what we all do when we give incentive rides, and that's make somebody puke. Right. And they were banking that things and overbanking into canyons and doing those kind of things that I didn't know helicopters could do. And I was like, yes, this is for me.
Sold. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, for sure. Okay. And then, I'm always curious, why'd you choose Apaches? I mean, I know, but let's hear your story on that.
I'd love to say that I knew how the Apache was the biggest, baddest, best helicopter invented. I didn't know that. To me, flying a helicopter was what I wanted to do. Which helicopter? Not that important, right? At that point. I was actually in the Guard at this point in my career and assigned to a unit that had Apaches. So it was a foregone conclusion. I was going to end up Apache pilot, right? But then I flew the Apache. And when I got in it, I was like, oh, this is awesome, right? And overwhelming, but awesome, right? And then I flew the Alpha model like we talked about. And initially I flew the Alpha model and learned the bag, did all that kind of stuff. And for those that don't know what that is they black out your cockpit.
Yeah. Talk through the bag for a minute, because I've mentioned it, but I'd like to hear somebody else describe it so that people don't think I'm lying about this thing.
Okay, so this is how comfortable this training is. Picture your sister. Now picture kissing her. That's how comfortable flying the bag is. Right? Now some of y'all that might be more comfortable than others, but basically they black out your whole cockpit and they force you to fly off the HDU, the helmet display unit, and use the symbology and the FLIR picture inside of that thing. And it's just not natural. It's not natural. It feels really awkward. And at first, like I said, kissing cousins or whatever you want to call it, it's really awkward. People start turning their heads and, they'll open the cockpit and somebody's head's on their knee with their cyclic above their head, trying to fly. And it's just that, but it's one of those things like the hover button when you're learning to fly the helicopter. Like, I can't get it. And it's not that you figure it out cognitively. It's that your brain figures it out passively in the background. All of a sudden, the HGU comes into focus and it's essay building, not essay sucking, and you love it. Because, and I'll tell you, I love it because when I came over to combat search and rescue, they took my HDU away and I missed it. I was like, give it back.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. And I also realized even further how bad that machine is when you fly one that's not as awesome, right?
Interesting.
Awesome mission. Combat search and rescue is an awesome mission.
Yeah, it is.
I will never take away from that. But the machine, not even close.
Dang. You mentioned hovering. One of the other things I do talk about occasionally, and it'd just be interested to get your thoughts. I felt like, in the way you described it, I don't know anybody who comes in and just hovers. Like it's a 6 to 8 hour gauntlet of breaking down egos of people who are pretty type A, successful, used to doing things right. And you kind of have to suck at it for a long period of time. How, like, I don't know. I'm curious how you looked at it.
So yeah, 100%. I think you nailed it. It's like one of those things like, well, I'm going to get this, obviously. I'm pretty cool, and then you're like, oh, what? And you're just like, I'm not just kind of bad at this. I'm really bad at this. And it's super hard. And I think it's even more hard for guys that are used to dealing with things kinetically, physically, kinesthetically, whatever you want to call it, like it's sports, like then you're really the bull in the china shop. You're trying to muscle it, and your muscles don't fly that helicopter.
Yeah.
Your brain does. Your brain flies it. Right. And once you have to get to that point where you let your brain take control, because it's taking notes the whole time you're cursing. It's taking notes. You just don't realize it. And then all of a sudden you just say, all right, synapses, you're on board. You have the controls. And then it tightens up, and I had a screamer. I had the screamer IP, the guy that just yells at you the whole time. And he's like, has 20,000 hours from Vietnam, and his back is not even a spine anymore. It's all cartilage, so like he's just screaming and yelling at me all the whole time. And he was a civilian guy. And
Yep.
I'm pretty respectful to people that give respect, but when they don't, I have no problem being blunt, and I would yell back at him. I was like, I'll give you 6 reasons why I suck at this thing and 20,000 why you're good, because the hours, right? And then finally I finally got my hover button. I don't know what it was. I soloed at 11 hours, so it was before that, hopefully, and started to hover. And then, of course, in his true nature, he's like, oh, look, somebody finally figured out how to hover. No, just starts going off. And I was like, just calmly. And I was on the controls, and I was still hovering. And my stick buddy was in the back. And I said, yep, that's bad news for you, old man. Because when you have your heart attack from being a jackass, I'm just going to keep hovering until you stop kicking.
He probably respected that, actually. I'm guessing.
I don't know.
What years? When did you go through flight school, Brian?
Pretty close to you. I went through in 2003.
Yeah, that's when I was there. Jeez. So my instructor for primary, like when we were going through hovering, was an older black guy, Vietnam, but he didn't talk much, and he smelled like alcohol all the time. He was going through a divorce. I mean, he'd give us like we go into autos out of nowhere. He's like telling me about how rough his divorce is, and he's like, engine failure. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
And he smells like brandy and beer and yeah.
So I was cutter flight. I don't know if you remember, but I was cutter flight, and I don't remember the name of the IP.
Me neither.
He was such a jackass that literally I would go back and forth with him. And my stick buddy's like, why are you crazy? Why are you talking to this guy like this? I'm like, because he's an a-hole, and then and finally he goes, why don't you just request an IP change if you have
wow.
Yeah. And I was like, I thought about that. I absolutely thought about that. But you know what I am? I'm a team player, and I wouldn't wish you on my worst enemy in this class.
Good on you, man.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. All right. That's awesome. These are some good stories from back at Mother Rucker.
Yeah.
So
I had my first auto at Rucker, real auto.
Like a real one?
Yeah.
What fit, like what was going on? And maybe just as a reminder to people what an auto is, if you can, Brian. They've heard it before, but for the people who haven't heard me talk about it in a while.
Yeah. So an auto rotation is bad. So I'm an instructor pilot, have been for years, and And basically, I teach students and I say, look, all emergency procedures are the same. And they're like, huh? And I'm like, keep the spinny thing spinning. That's it. Everything is subjected to that. If the spinny thing's still spinning, you got time, talk. If the spinny thing's not spinning, you got to know what to do immediately to get it spinning, or else you're going to be flat, right? And so in an auto rotation, you don't have anything driving that spinny thing at all. So it is incumbent upon you to make very aggressive movements counterintuitively, by the way, because the uppy downy thing in your left hand, when you start falling downy, you got to slam downy, right, to keep it flying. So that's counterintuitive. Most people want to yank it uppy, which will slow it down even further and increase your downy.
Yep.
Like those technical terms.
That's kindergarten terms. We got it.
I try to keep it real, right? So when I was in the basic combat skills portion of the syllabus, which is night flying goggles over low level in Alabama, where it's tree covered everywhere, right? We're doing I'm on the map. The IP's flying. So I'm going to give you a little bit of like, I wasn't the hero, but here's the deal. We're flying and I'm looking on the map and I'm navigating and I hear something in the engine. I hear it kind of like come a little bit. And I'm looking at the N1, and which is the engine RPM, and it's going the wrong way. It's coming down, and I'm like, I'm the new student. I'm like, am I in, question mark, right? So I keyed the mic. I was like, look at the N1. Then we get the audio. Like right when I said it, it's off, right? And he right then we came over a pasture, right? Just over an opening. He dumps the collective, starts the auto, and we're immediately in the flare because we're right at the low level altitude. And I'm like, oh, and there's one giant tree in the middle of this pasture, and he's aimed right at it. And I'm like, you see that tree, right? And he goes to the right. And then we're lined up right over, as goggles, as you get lower, I could see there's a fence. And we're like 30 feet and coming down. I was like, you see that fence? Immediate left on the ground. And then the fence is out my right door. Boom, And so
and you just landed right side up, like you didn't roll or anything.
Nope. He autoed
wow, man.
Autoed it like a champion, landed it, didn't compress any spines. It was the pasture was fairly soft, which helped, and we did kind of do that come forward because it's stuck in the mud almost, and then he opened the door, leaned out, and puked.
No way.
and I was like, I knew what just happened, but it didn't really hit home how crazy that was. And my phrase was, so that's what that feels like, huh? And he's puking, right? And my stick buddy is in the back, literally asleep, still asleep, like didn't know, just happened. And but this guy, this IP had another single engine auto before, and had to ditch it in tree. I had to come down in trees.
Oh,
so he had wounds and everything from that. And so did, the helicopter was pretty trashed and all that kind of stuff. So I understand why his meal came back.
Yeah. Dang, man. Way to get it indoctrinated early to that part of aviation. Okay. So I also should have said, I went through the alpha model course with two guys from the Utah National Guard.
Do you remember the names?
I do not remember. One of them was older gentleman. So, this is 03. He was probably, I say older, man. He was probably our age, dude. He was probably late 40s.
Yeah.
Other guy was probably late 20s, blonde. Yeah, I just can't remember their name.
By chance, the older guy his name wasn't Ken Jones, was it?
I don't think it was.
Okay. All right.
Nah, I don't know. But yeah, I definitely remember that because you all had the aircraft out there, so they knew what they were getting and doing the transition. Okay.
Yep.
Let's talk the unit that you ended up going to. So you stay in the Guard at that time, Brian?
So I did. I came back to Watts, Western Aviation, Attack Aviation Training or whatever, Army Aviation Training Center, something like that, and learned the Apache, the Alpha model. Then I did, and while I was there, the co-located first, the 285th, I learned that they were going to deploy. And I've been jonesing to deploy since 9/11. Right? I'm like, let's go, let's go. And I was like, so I started talking to him. Like, you guys need a lieutenant, in a line unit as a platoon leader, in a flying position, like I will come with you, but only if I'm going to fly, right? And they're like, yeah, we'll take it. We'll make you a platoon leader. And so that they did. And so I just stayed in Arizona when I was done. And then they immediately pushed me over, like we said, to the transition course because they were getting the longbows. And then we had to do our UFTP, unit fielding training program, attached onto our deployment. So we went to Fort Hood for 9 months and then immediately went from there to Afghanistan.
No way. What year was this? Was this 05?
05, 06, 07 was the bridge that we were gone, basically.
Wow, man.
Yeah, it was very long, and 23 months total, basically being separated from family. I got married 5 months prior to that. It's a big part of the book is the stress and strangulation, or whatever you want to call it, that caused on a marriage that was struggling because she had mental illness that I didn't know about at the time, borderline personality disorder, for those that are familiar with that. And so there was a whole nother, depth to the strain on from the deployment.
Jeez. So where do you guys end up going in Afghanistan?
So when I first left, I left as a platoon leader for a Bravo company, and we landed in Bagram.
Okay.
And Bagram had a detachment in Jalalabad. So most of the time I was in Bagram, I was actually the detachment commander at Jalalabad. But halfway through our deployment, the commander down in the Helmand in Kandahar got into a little bit of trouble, and they replaced him with me. So I went down to Kandahar as the company commander and ended up seeing that theater for 6-7 months as well. And it was two different fights, completely different. I'm so grateful for it because it taught me significantly different tactics. It taught me significantly different power management skills as a pilot, significantly different like management of teams and stacks and all those kind of things. And I couldn't have asked for a more baptism by fire. We're going to throw you into the corn gall. Yep. And you're going to have all kinds of nasty high mountain engagements, power management issues, get shot at and shot up and shout at the enemy a lot in different ways. And then we're going to put you down in Kandahar, where the enemy is a little bit more organized, methodical, and a little bit more conventional. And you're gonna have plenty of power margin, but you're gonna be at more risk of being shot down because they know what they're doing, right? And so it was just kind of a true baptism by fire, and engagement after engagement after engagement. It's interesting to me. We deployed as a battalion. We had people in Salerno, we had people in Bagram, and we had people in Kandahar. Now Kandahar got the most engagements. Jalalabad was second, and then Salerno was last. And then, but what's interesting is even in those places that got a lot of engagements, there were guys that made it through that whole deployment with 3 or 4 engagements, right? There were weeks I had 3 or 4 engagements, right? And it's the same deployment. It's the same deployment. And like, I came out of there, and I don't know, I wasn't keeping track, but I pretty confidently say I was in the top 2 of people that had engagements while we were in the whole battalion. Good luck, bad luck, how I flew, how I didn't fly, I don't know. I really don't. Part of it, probably a little bit of all those things, right?
Were you flying nights or no?
Nights, days,
everything.
Pinky time, brownouts, whatever you want to call it, thunder, what do you call them? Cloud bursts.
Jeez, man. So, and this was 07, you were down there.
06, 07.
Into 07. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you guys rip out with the 82nd?
We were with the 82nd.
You were with them. Yeah. Because that's who we ripped out with when we got there.
The 101st came and got us.
Yeah.
Out of down south is who came and replaced us was the 101st.
Yeah. So that was us. So I was in company command at Salerno, and then we had 2 other companies, one in J-Bad, which was probably the toughest fighting, and then another down in Kandahar, man. So similar arrangement.
Yeah.
Let's talk through first. I would just ask if you could share more about the power margin, because I think it's important if we're talking about flying helos in Afghanistan. And then I want to talk about some of the tough fights up in JBAD.
Well, okay, power margin. We kind of talked about it a little bit. There's a point where if you pull more power than the aircraft can produce, the spinny thing will slow down, right? We call that droop. Droop the engines. Well, when you're up at the high altitudes, obviously altitude, temperature, and weight are the three, whatever you want to call it, X, Y, and Z of the equation that gives you your power margin. Well, in the summertime up in Jalalabad area, you had heat and you had altitude, right? And heat being the biggest one. So our power margins were very, very minimal. There was times where we couldn't fly single engine. We have two engines in the aircraft, but you need them both to fly, right? You can't, if you lose one, you're not going to maintain level flight. You're going to be the first one to see the crash. So, and we had engines shot out and had to force land some stuff. And so the enemy was legit up in those mountains, but really cumulo granite or whatever you want to call it, Taliban granite, was just as menacing as Taliban, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. So up in JBAD, can you take us to one of the first like kind of tough engagements that you find yourself in?
My very first engagement. So in the book, it really is a coming of age story in multiple ways. I went there as a co-pilot, left there as an AC. I went there as a platoon leader, went to detachment commander, company commander. I went there as a newlywed man who knew nothing and came back as a man with a lifetime of experiences and relationship trauma. So it really was this evolution through the whole time I was there. And when I first got there, they're like, yeah, you're first in the docket to become an AC because, well, they said you're ready, but what they meant is we need more ACs, right? And so I did my upgrade while I was there. Well, my first engagement, I was still a co-pilot, and I was in the front seat of the Apache, and I was flying with a seasoned warrant officer. His name's Doug Earl, and as we got it now, he'd been in engagements before, I hadn't, and I'd been called to TICs, troops in contact, multiple times, but the Taliban just ran away bravely, right? And so we never got a chance to engage or develop that situation. Well, this particular one, and I remember it's Titan 1-1 was the call sign because you remember your first kiss, you remember your first time, and you remember your first engagement, right? So Titan 1-1 was the guy. We call around the corner, and it's a steep canyon. It's about 300 feet to the floor, and on each side it kind of levels out as a shelf and then goes up again. And so at that shelf on one side was a road, and there was a convoy. They had hidden an IED and were pinned on that side of the cliff, couldn't go any further, and they were taking fire, effective fire from 2 or 3 POOs, points of origin, right? So usually we roll in, Taliban runs away bravely, and they get time to work it out and get through, and we get frustrated, and we get what I call tactical blue balls. Then, in this particular instance, they didn't stop shooting. The guy's on the radio, and he's like, they're still taking fire. And I'm like, they're still taking fire. That means we can do our job. That means we can figure out where they're at. We can do what we came here to do. We're out there ready to run through that paper on the football field, right? It's there. We can run through it this time. Every other time, we just go up to the paper, turn away, and go back in the locker room, right? Now we can run through it, right? And so that's where we're at. But I can't see muzzle flash in the daytime. This is a daytime engagement. And I'm trying. I've never seen it before. I'm looking. I got the TADs, the tackle acquisition display unit, all looking, searching all over the place. Doug's looking. We're getting frustrated because they're still shooting. I'm like, this is what I've prayed for. You don't know what you're praying for, but this is what I've hoped for because we've prepared for, we've trained for, we want to do our job. And we thought all we needed was that for them to keep fighting and we would be able to do our job. Well, they kept fighting and we can't do our job because they can't find them, right? Well, Doug started to get more aggressive, and we're doing a high-low technique where one of the birds is low and the other one's higher, watching our back, and he starts snooping and pooping about as low as he can get. I don't know how low, 20, 30 feet, and sometimes 20, 30 knots. That's a target right there, for the bad guys. And it's on purpose. It's probably hubris on our part. But I don't know, and I don't blame Doug because I did the same thing multiple times. and it's a learning curve, right? You give that commitment, you give that courage. Sometimes you give a little bit too much courage, and instead of getting increased capability, you get crazy, right? And a lesson, hopefully, and not death. So as we're rolling through there and we're getting low and we're right over that ledge on the opposite side of the convoy, we just now came off over the edge. So now we're over the valley. And then we just, boom, we got hit. I mean, boom, hard. The freaking thud concussion came through the aircraft, through my innards, like, woo, like whatever. And now we're falling. And we are falling down into that ravine. And I am like, holy crap, I can see the rock we're going to crash on. I can see it's coming, like it's coming towards me. And, you know, so your mind, and it's seconds, but my mind's like, we're going to hit that. Okay. I got to tighten my straps. Then I got to get the radio. I got to get the gun. I'm going to get, I'm thinking through all this stuff on our way down. I got to get dug out, but the truth of the matter is I was in the front seat. So I was going to be munched and he was going to be okay.
Yeah.
Right. So on the way down, that's what I'm thinking. And then all of a sudden we start flying and we come back out of it. And I'm like, what just happened? And Doug was on the controls being a hero, right? That's what happened. He didn't freak out. He realized that we just were in bad air. We were in vortex reinstate, falling through bad air because there was an RPG that blew up right underneath us and created this vacuum, if you will. And we fell. And he's a champion. And I was the new guy going, I'm glad I'm not on the controls, right? Because he just saved us. And we flew through, come back around. And I was like, so that's what that feels like.
And that was an RPG airburst underneath you guys?
It was an RPG, either airburst or hit the cliff next to us. I think we'll get to this. I think that one was an airburst.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why here in a second, because this develops a little further. As we come back up and we go right back to snooping and pooping. We didn't learn our lesson because we're like, we're live. Here we go. Let's do this again.
Get back in there.
Yeah. So we're doing it and we're snooping. And all of a sudden I realize I'm seeing muzzle flash. I'm not seeing it, but I'm seeing it with my peripherals. It's just this little, real quick little thing. And I'm like, wait, that's muzzle flash. That's muzzle flash. And I said it out loud. That's muzzle flash. And he's like, where? And I'm like, and I got on the radio with their friendlies. I was like, confirm you have no friendlies on the opposite side. Just confirm there's no friendlies over on the opposite side. He's like, no, there's no friendlies. Doug's like, shoot it. And so I just slewed the 30 to me and I started shooting the muzzle flash. Once I shot that, then we can hit rockets, all these other things too. But the powerful part of that was I'd shot that gun many times up to that point, but it was at targets, right? That was the first time where I knew where I squeezed that trigger. While the trigger felt the same physically, it felt different because I squeezed that trigger and people went away, right? I know they died because I saw muzzle flash. I exploded that area. The guy's dead. And there's probably more than one guy there. They're dead. More muzzle flash. I squeeze the trigger. They're gone. More guys are dead. This is real. War is real. This isn't a video game, right? This isn't a movie. This isn't a show. Like, they're dead. And they're dead because I squeezed the trigger, right? Now I'm happy I could do my job. I'm happy that I could do what I trained to do. I felt fulfillment in that, but I also felt this vacancy in what just happened, right? And it was almost immediate.
In that moment? Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. Wow.
It wasn't so poignant in that moment, but it was there. It was more powerful and impactful when I got out of the aircraft at the end of the day. But I felt it. And it was real. And then I got, shake it off. Let's go. Boom, 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 boom. It didn't stick, but it was there. And we snooped and pooped and continued to do this thing. And we ended up in almost the exact same spot as the first time and got rocked again. Same thing. Boom. But this time, chunks of something are hitting the canopy as we're falling, this time at an angle, not down. I have 10-minute-old wisdom. So I look at the engine page and say, oh, we're still good. Right. And Doug's a champion. So he flies us out again. The reason I think the first one was an airburst is I didn't see those big chunks. At that time, when I saw these chunks the second time, I don't know if it was chunks of us, but it turned out it wasn't. It was chunks of the cliff next to us hitting us. Right. Wow. So, but at that point, I've been in the fight and I was calm. I actually came down like, hey, Doug, that's twice from there. Obviously, that guy's not on this side. He's shooting from across the way, right? Why didn't we think about that the first time? Right. And we rolled back around and we told the ground guys, see, yep, we saw the mustache, which is what I called it, the little RPG plume when they shoot, right? They're like, we're marking it with 50K in the direction and you can't really see it, tracer a little bit. And then we start throwing some rockets out there. They're like a little bit further, a little bit, yep, right there. So we engaged that guy and got rid of him and then continued to engage. And that was my first engagement. We left. Titan 1-1 was able to move. Titan 1-1 tracked me down a week and a half later in the chow hall. I was eating my food. I hear Iron
No
1-6.
way.
Yeah, he calls me in. He says, is anybody in here Iron 1-6? I said, oh, crap. I'm in trouble. I'm like, yeah, that's me. And then he comes over and it's a captain. So I stand up because I'm a lieutenant. And I said, sir, their problem? No problem at all. No problem at all. I'm Titan 06. It's like we were pinned down. You guys came in and saved our bacon. That's not exactly what he said. I can't remember the exact words. I do remember one thing that's spot on. And he's like, I stopped here because I wanted to thank you and the crew. I want to shake your hand and I want to give you my coin. Right. That's a captain's coin. I have coins from generals. I have coins from everyone else, but that coin still is my most valuable coin. Right. And it's just a little coin. It's not these crazy ones, beer opener or whatever. It's none of that. It's just a little round coin, but it carries with it a Thor-like punch because what he said was, LT, LT, what you guys do is important. Keep doing it. Right. And that was powerful for me because we already have a connection with the ground guys, right? This.
Yep.
It's I don't know how to explain it. It's just a heart-to-heart connection. It really is. If they're getting hurt and they're taking effective rounds and we're overhead, I take that personal. Like that's
Brian, can I ask you something on that?
Yeah.
I agree with you on the relationship and how tight it is. Do you almost feel like it's not the same both directions? And that's okay if it isn't, that we're almost looking at them like it's our job to protect them. Like they're not looking at us like they got to protect us up in the air. It's more of like us being the mother looking at the kids to some degree to protect them.
I would agree that the perspective of protection is our sentiment, but it's also their sentiment. Like where, yeah, they're not looking to protect us. I agree with that, but I do feel that the connection that they feel for us is just as powerful because I've talked to so many of them, and they're just like, dude, when you guys came in the area, I knew I could breathe. You guys came in the area, I knew we were going to make it out. You guys came in the area, I knew that I wasn't going to die that day. Right? That's powerful, and it's self-perpetuating, right? Because you want to be that guy, right? And I have so much respect for those guys because I have respect for anybody who raised their hand and said, I'll go do this, right? Yeah. Which is whatever it is, 1% or whatever we say it is. I have respect for anybody. My girlfriend noticed this the other day. When I meet somebody who's from the military, I will call them brother from the start because they're my brother until they prove otherwise. Whereas anybody in just the general population, they have to earn that. But if you raise your hand and said, I'll do this, you've already earned it. You can until you prove otherwise, you're my brother. She pointed it out. I didn't even know I did it. She's like, you call anybody you meet from the mill, hey brother, thanks for that. We'll talk. You don't do that with other people. And I was like, that's true. They haven't earned it. Right? Doesn't mean they can't, but they haven't.
Yeah.
There's nobody who's earned it more in my eyes than the guy that may get paid the same as a McDonald's operator who will kick in a freaking door and look the enemy in the face and say, I'm doing this for me, for my country, for my guy. It's really not for the country, though. When you get in the middle of it, it's for your brothers. And that's that connection that I'm talking about, right? That's what's powerful. You can't mess with that.
Yeah, totally. When you mention the trauma that you experienced in this deployment and growing up, like, as you said, kind of baptism by fire, but you also referenced the relationship trauma that you went through. When you look at trauma, does it include events like this, or is it more relationship focused? Like what was going on with your wife at the time, or does it also include the elements of combat?
So it's interesting. I say this all the time. Trauma is trauma, pain is pain, and you don't have to go to combat to experience it. It, it as a human, it's your right to experience trauma. Now, trauma has this bad connotation, right? Trauma is a lightning bolt. It's very powerful. It's very powerful. And if it hits you the right way, you're dead, right? But if you use that power the right way, you can power a city. It can either be the weight that pulls you down or the foundation that makes you a better version, the best version of you. We always say, so and so, I hear it all the time. This guy grew up in this location and this thing, and despite all odds, became this amazing person. And I say, baloney. It's not despite all odds. It's because of all odds that he became that amazing person. Because things don't happen to us, they happen for us. And if you maintain that perspective, you become that person. That lightning bolt will power your city, but you have to understand how to capture that power and how to direct that power. And what happens is a lot of us don't know how to do that. A lot of us don't know how to direct that power. And when we internalize it, it's destructive. It's destructive. But when we accept that it's part of who we are and accept that that happened for us, not to us, now we can turn it on its head. We can freaking kick ass and take names. And that's what we can do. And that's what anybody can do, right? But it's a process, and it doesn't always happen naturally. Not everybody's set up to digest it that way, right? But we can do that. So
I like that. And you mentioned that moment right after pulling the trigger the first time, the kind of feeling or experience wasn't like pulling it in on the range. When you landed, you alluded to having a different experience, or maybe you felt it a little deeper. Can you dig into that a little?
yeah, we left out of there, and at first it was kind of like pat each other on the back. We came in, we did our job. Way to go. This was intense. I got a little bit of adrenaline. Let's let that fizzle out. And then we landed Jalalabad, shut the thing down, the engine slowed down, wore down. It's already, everything was kind of almost in slow motion. Like it was like happening in like the background, right? And I was doing it, I'm the one pulling power level, PCLs and all that, and then I got out and I took that armor plate off and the flight vest off and my helmet off and hung it all up, ready to still go back out, right? That was powerful there too. I'm like, this isn't over. That wasn't a one-time event. We just got here, right? So that was powerful. And then I just hit me. It was like, it's a bad machine. And it can transform from a thing of beauty to a weapon of devastation to a bringer of salvation in seconds, right? But the responsibility of the people directing and how it does that is not adequately taught. Because what do I think? What do you think you're going to do? It's an Apache. It blows stuff up. Enemy, people, heartbeats, families. That's what it does, right? War is ugly. And you have to operate in the ugly. And if you're good, you're going to be good at the ugly. But that ugly can't remain inside of you. You have to operate in the ugly, but don't let it operate in you. And that is a difficult task for anybody to take on, but it is doable. It is possible. But yeah, that was what was weighing on me. I was like, I've killed men today. I don't know how many, several. They're not going home. I'm home. And as the deployment grew and that number grew, it became overwhelming that the ratio was so one-sided, because part of it's because I have that bad machine, right? But part of me respects that enemy who has the conviction to go nose to nose with that machine, with freaking AK-47s that somebody left here, right? That's conviction. You got to respect it, whether you agree with their moral convictions and all those other things or not, which I don't. which I do not, you still have to respect that conviction, because I don't know that everybody in our military has that same conviction. They don't get a mid-tour. That's their life.
Yeah. 17-year deployment, basically.
Yeah. With life expectancy of 30 years.
Yeah. Were you able to process it that way when it was happening, or is this you kind of looking back on it now with more mature eyes?
I processed it that way almost immediately, because I knew I needed to process it in a healthy way for me to continue to be able to be effective in wielding that weapon. Right? Because I saw in some of the guys already who had been in engagements that were taking that lightning bolt and swallowing it. And it was noticeable. And
What do you mean by swallowing it, Brian? Like not talking about it or not processing it?
They weren't taking the power that comes from trauma and using it to strengthen who they were, right? Not seeing it as an opportunity to learn something, as an opportunity to grow from it. They were like, I did it, I deal with it. This is my cross to bear, and putting it down, right? And pushing it down inside. And that's a natural thing to do, because we're men, we're soldiers, women too, but you know what I mean? You just got to beat your chest, right? Because that's what we got to do. But it's just stupid, right? It's just stupid, and the narrative is becoming more commonplace to say that, and that's good. I'm glad, right? There's something about being bold that I like, but there's something about being bold and acting like nothing affects you that is wrong. Right?
Agreed. I wanted to ask you about one of your tougher moments in the cockpit. And I know we haven't talked about your transition over to CSAR yet. So if it comes later, that's fine. And let's talk about that move. If it's still in the Apache, let's talk through it.
It is still in the Apache. My toughest moment was, I mentioned or alluded to that I did get in a lot of engagements while I was there. And, we took rounds. We had things happen where, I lost systems in the helicopter periodically in different engagements. And, we came out of them, but we always came out of them victors. We always came out of it. We took more than they took, right? We gave more than they gave, right? We were there for the ground guys and they walked away. It was always a win. It was always a win. Sometimes there was a little bit of collateral damage, but nothing that was like Dear Diary, right? Well, the way my deployment went was kind of a natural climax. It just built and built and built. Like I said, it was like start here as a novice, don't know anything. And in all these facets of my life, they were building. And the very last big mission that we were on was Musa Calais. And it was a Taliban stronghold, hadn't been messed with for years. And there was this big mission saying, we're going to take it back. And it had been in the background for a while and saying, we're going to do this. And they were like, it was getting to that point where we're like, you bet, if you're going to do it with the guys that are seasoned and been here, you better do it, because we're getting ready to leave. And you guys, apparently, we're going to come take this mission. And I don't think you should give that to the first guys getting in here, because there's lessons that we're going to try to teach them, like that we've learned over the last year. But some of the stuff you pick up on the fly, and this is the biggest thing that we've done since we've been here. I'm not sure that's the one you want to pick up on the fly, right? So they finally listened to that reason and said, okay. But it was like, now it's written like a story, right? This is your last mission. You guys weren't going to do it, but now you're going to do it. And I'm like, I've heard this story before,
Yeah.
So
end of a deployment, yeah, that's scary.
Yeah, like Finny fly, all these things, right? And so, we were taking precautions, and we got into there was some scripture read and those kind of things. And the intel came in and gave us a brief, and she was like, we assessed that one of you guys is at least going to get shot down. Like, right. That was the assessment going in, and that was the accepted assessment. Right.
So this is like, unlike these other ops where you go in and there's some enemy down there. This is going to be a contentious fight going in, and it.
Yep. And they know, and they have all their best weaponry, and they have all their best weaponry operators. They have all of it is there. And They know we're coming because we have to drop leaflets so everybody else can get out. And I'm just like, you know, nothing like giving them forewarning. I'm pretty sure Sun Tzu said nothing about that. But anyway, the intel gives us that brief, and she starts crying, right? Well, she knows us. We've been there for a year. She knows us, and she knows the guys that are leaving, and and so I put my arm around her and pulled her out, and I was like, stop crying. It's like, I appreciate what your feelings. These guys don't need that, right? And she's like, I'm sorry. I said, don't be sorry. Understand me. Your job's important. Keep doing it.
Yeah.
Right? So we launched on this thing, and I was the first helicopter in, and it was cool. I had my XO, Major Craig Aaliyah pulled me aside. I don't think he needed to say this, but I'm glad he did. He's like, hey, big mission. Goes without saying, lead from the front. But absolutely, I'm on the first helicopter. That's going to happen. That's already in the plan. I never cherry pick missions. I didn't. I made and because the guy before me did, right? I just put me on the rotation. But this was a very deliberate op and a very, very substantial, right? And so, yes, I'm on the first bird in, right? So we went, and that first day was we got in some engagements, nothing real big, whatever, not as big as what we thought.
And this is all daytime, Bri?
No, night.
So it's all night. Okay. And what's the ground contingent? Like who's going in? Is it A&A with some SF, or is it?
We were dropping in a whole, like 300 infantrymen. It was an 26 helicopter air assault. Largest to that point, I think, ever since still, at that point. And then there was some tanks that came from the Brits and whatever. There's a book on it called Operation Snakebite. And they get my name wrong in there, but it's okay. I think they say I'm Josh. I think they say I'm Josh Slade or whatever.
Oh, guys.
Yeah, whatever. And they misquoted me a couple of times too, but it doesn't matter. But the book is pretty accurate. Anyway, there was armored division. There was, and the ANA was supposed to come in after. It was supposed to be their win, but obviously they weren't going to be the ones doing it. And so we had this engagement first night, all this kind of stuff, a little bit of things. There's some stories there. But what we're talking about, the toughest, so we'll go to that one. 2 days later, I roll in there, and stuff had really started to kick off. The first day wasn't as big a deal, but now every time we're in there, we're going Winchester. Every time, right? And I'm flying with a new co-pilot that I've never flown with before, because in order to make this happen and have continuous coverage for 2 weeks is what was required, I needed to get augmented from some of the company in Salerno. So I had guys from Salerno come down, and he was one of these guys. Well, so he's flying with me, and we get in an engagement. We shoot a Hellfire in a cave with a Dishka, and we shoot he'd shot 2 Hellfires the whole deployment, and we shot like 3 in the first morning, right? And so we're talking,
man.
Yeah,
that's
so we're
intense.
so we're like talking and joking and everything, because he's excited, because he's like, I'm getting to do my job. And I'm like, I'm kind of excited for him, because I've been doing this for a year at JBAD in here. I mean, it's been this way. So I was excited to see somebody doing it now for like the first time, right? Well, we get a call from Roshan Tower, which is just I can remember, I think it's to the southeast of Moose Calais. It was an overwatch position, and they basically said, hey, we're taking fire from the tree line. We're acoustically locating the azimuth. We'll give it to you. We're going to clear you hot in on that azimuth. So, okay. So we basically got in what would be a downwind leg for a gun pattern, or outbound and leg. And I was rolling what would be the inbound leg, but we hadn't got cleared hot yet. So I started to slow down a little bit, and I was a little slower, and then I wanted to be around 60 knots and 300 feet. And I was like, oh, I'm going to have to nose this thing over. I don't know if we're going to get cleared hot at this point. And then right then they cleared us in. So then I banked in a little steeper to get some speed. And right then we took a barrage fire.
And cleared to fire 30 millimeter on that azimuth within 2 kilometers of the tower. Minimal, over.
RPM high.
You all right? I was shot.
Rotor
I was shot.
RPM
You're
low.
okay? I was shot.
Rotor RPM
Shot in the
low.
leg. Hey, Oh, Jesus Christ.
RPM low.
Shot in the leg. I'm headed in.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I'm in Bucks.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
1 Fury 40 21. You okay?
Oh, God, yeah.
Okay, hey, pressure on your blood. Yeah, arrow 2.
Basically, I lost my engine. My co-pilot got his leg, his femur hit, shattered, and my flight controls all jammed at the same time. So we're in a bank and falling, and he's screaming on the ICS. And immediately that scream was the first thing. Ah, scream, scream, and you know, of course, I knew what happened because he's screaming it. They shot me, like whatever. So, but he's the third priority in that list, right? I lost an engine. We're falling, and my flight controls are jammed. He's third priority. So I slammed the collective down to get the rotor back, which we've kind of talked about how to do that anyway. Because I get he's screaming in the background. I get rotor RPM low, right? And then
I love that voice. I love it.
And I slammed it down, and I got rotor RPM high. So, and you can hear that in the gun tape. I don't know if I sent you that or not, but I can send it to you. And so we sliced down, and we have to go into Bucks, backup control system, because I'm jammed. I'm jammed up. Now, unbeknownst to me, it's because his leg got shot and shattered and flipped around and wrapped around the cyclic. That's why the cyclic's jammed, right? I don't know that at the time. So I went to slam that thing out, and I did. I broke out of the mechanical linkage, and his leg unwrapped. And obviously he screamed because that. And after this thing was over, he had a perfect bruise of a cyclic on his other leg because I slammed it. But I was already in a bank, and the way I had my controls, I had to break in the direction of the bank to get it to break through. And I remember thinking that Boeing advertises there's a 1 second easy on, and that means nothing's going to happen in that 1 second. And at that point, I remember right in that moment thinking, I hope that works like it's supposed to, because if it doesn't, I'm snap rolling this thing in Bucks in a single engine. We're not going to, we won't recover. We'll land upside down, which helicopters don't do well, right? And so I slammed it over. It worked like it was supposed to. Come back to center, regained forward flight, and then started to pull out of there. And it was really touch and go on the power margin with one engine. We weren't altitude. We're at high altitude, but it was warm in Kandahar, and there was just a fuzzy edge to fly. And I flew out of there, punched the wing stores, and got a 30-minute flight back home with talking him through first aid and trying to keep him lucid and all that.
Wow.
I had to do a roll-on with Bucks, which to my knowledge had never been done before. I don't think it had. So I didn't know how that was going to work. I was like, well, I hope it works, because have you ever flown in Bucks?
I doubt it. I mean, it's been a minute since I heard that term. When you said it the first time, I was like, oh my God, it was bringing back memories. I doubt it.
It's really sloppy. It's like flying at 14,000 feet. That's what it feels like really sloppy controls. And so I'm like, I got to do this roll on. And I was getting erratic inputs too. Like, I was like, maybe it's the Duke or the Acorn jammers. There were still like studies out to say whether or not that would actually interfere with the Bucks fly-by-wire or not. But like, I'd get like it jerking over. I'm like, whoa. And in the audio, you'll hear me go, is that you on the cyclic, right? Because it bumps. Well, when I listen to it again, I'm like, dummy, they're not controlled. They're not connected.
They're not linked anymore, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was an electronic jerk, right? That was not him touching anything, right? So we'd land, and I pull him out of the cockpit because the EMS was legitimately on the wrong side of the house, the helicopter air landing strip. We called ahead. They're supposed to be where they're just wrong. They're on the wrong side. So I shut it down. I forklift him out of there with my hands. He's about the same size as me, big dude. So pick him up, and about that time they pull up, and I jump down on the ground, and we slide him off of the EFAB, and his wound slides right in front of my face. And it's a gigantic hole in his leg, gigantic, with muscles just hanging and blood and drip and everything twitching. And it feels like it pauses right there. It didn't, I'm sure, but it felt like it just freeze frame right there. And I was staring at it. And this guy was actually a pretty funny guy, pretty good. He was a great guy. And just like, he saw me staring at his wound. And if you listen to the video, I'll send to you, we were actually joking on the way there, right? We got to that point, right? He's in pain, excruciating pain. But we got to that point where we're working through this thing. And he goes, you got me shot. Right? He was joking. He was completely joking. But man, and this is where I told you, I mentioned it earlier, insidious backpack, insidious rucksack. I just put one on when he said that. And I put a heavy one on. I put it on and I held it on for 8 years. And they pulled him out. And then I had, I flew back to Kandahar in the back of a Chinook. I came out, the battalion commander, the brigade commander, task force commander, and brigade commander, whatever you want to call them, were sitting there, and both of them came up and asked me how I was doing. I said, I've had better days. And I said, but I'm going to go fix this tomorrow. And the brigade commander looked at me and he goes, no, I don't think it's a good idea that you fly tomorrow. You just had this happen. I said, sir, I've been in this country for almost a year. I've been engaged at the north and the south, all over the place. We've had lots of different types of dynamics, but we have never left the losers. Today, I left the loser. I need to fix this tomorrow for me, for Otto, for whoever else is out there. We don't leave the loser. I need to go fix this tomorrow. I'm not rage fighting. I'm just finishing the fight that we didn't finish today, and I'm good to go. And he looked at me like a puppy, did the head turn, like, and I was like, oh, he's not gonna let me. He's not gonna let me. And he just kind of looked at me and he goes, all right, you be careful. Right. And
nice.
Yeah. And I'm so grateful for him for that, because the next day we did destroy that tree line, because we took fire from there again. And the tree line and everything behind it was leveled. Right. And I mentioned that rucksack.
Yeah.
I'd never flown with, the guy's name's Otto. I'd never flown with Otto prior to that. I knew him. He's a great guy. He's just like, and I got to know him more that day. Then he went to Germany, and I didn't see him after. Heard about things here and there. I went to the Air Force. I kept in contact with people from that unit, but he wasn't one of them, because we were never close or tight anyway. Right? I reached out to him a couple of times, and we'd have just real general, hey, good, all those kind of things. 8 years, I think, on the day, he posted something on Facebook, and he just basically expressed his gratitude for how things were managed that day.
How you landed that thing. Controlled it.
Yeah. And it was really powerful. And I didn't know I had that rucksack on until I read it, because I took it off.
Damn.
Yeah. Yeah. And I could stand up a little taller. Often we don't know. We don't know we're carrying that weight. And we got to do some good inside looks. We got to do good inside looks to see where we're being weighed down, and accept the trauma that we've experienced as that. You experienced that. That's it. It's for you, not to you. It's for you, not to you. You got to look inside and see that, because if you don't, it will weigh you down. 8 years I carried that without even freaking knowing it, So I'm grateful you did that post.
Man, dude, I interviewed a former SEAL named Rob Huberty, and he was talking about, he was the state champion wrestler and tried out for DevGru and didn't make it, but ready to go back. But he just said, like, I remember all my losses. I can tell you the name of every guy I lost to wrestling. I can't tell you the name of a single guy I beat. And this way we beat ourselves up. And it makes me think of this, because in that flight, I mean, I'm hoping you got a DFC or something for that flight. Did you, Brian, or no?
I did 8 years later. Honestly, it's a kind of a cool story too, in leadership, but yeah, I did.
I want to hear it, but I would just say, like, to me, the fact that you're even here today and that he's alive at this point in time is because of that. But for whatever reason, I don't know if it's how we gravitate, the people that the military draws, or how we're brought up in the military. Like, you're harping on the fact his leg is shot up, and you're I'm assuming PIC for this, but man, the fact you even walked away is because of you.
Yeah. And I could see that logically,
Yeah.
you know,
No, I hear you, man.
I could see it logically. And I didn't even know that I was carrying that other side that we're talking about as a weight, but I was, and a heavy weight, you know. That was one of them that I carried, and the other one was the ratio of how many men died at my hand versus one man that lived, me. That was one that I was carrying, and I didn't realize it either. And when that one got lifted, I broke down. I mean, I'll just say it.
What was weighing you down with that one?
When I first came back, it'd been years, and I started to be like, why am I not as bothered by this as other people? Like, I know I killed a lot of people, why does it not seem to bother me? Right. Well, what I was mirroring was the fact that it did bother me. I just wasn't admitting it. Right. And I did talk to some professionals about it. I was like, look, am I a psychopath? Like, seriously, it was a concern of mine. I was like, I'm okay. Like, and this ratio, I don't know, 1 to whatever the number is, and it's a big number. I don't know what it is, but it's too big. And they're like, if you're worried about being a psychopath, you're probably not a psychopath. But
Or that,
yeah. But I talked to him, and I also went to a church leader with it. And he's the one that really kind of hit me hard, because the rucksack I was carrying was, I wasn't sure if I was good with God.
And clearly you grew up religious, as you said, and so this is probably questioning a whole lot at that point in time.
Yeah. So I sat down with him, and I was like, look, this is the thing. It bothers me that it doesn't bother me. And he said, I hear what you're saying, but this is what God's telling me to tell you. And he said, you're okay in his eyes. You're good with God.
And that took the rucksack off, Brian?
It did. It did. But here's what I'll tell guys. You can take that rucksack off, and you'll feel it. And it's an acceptance that you have to, like I've talked on about a couple times, accept that things happen for you, not to you. But we are human, and we're stupid sometimes. And we start to put that sucker back on. We start to put that stupid weight back on. So it's a continued process of analyzing. And this is, you don't have to be in war. That trauma is trauma. Pain is pain. You carry your own Afghanistan in some way. You can have that lightning bolt power your village, or you can have it tearing you apart. The power is where you divert it, right? So I've had to take that one off a couple times. The one with the wound, it was a one-time deal. I haven't had to take that one off again. But the ratio one, I've had to take off a couple times.
Can I ask you this, Brian? In either case, imagine you're listening to this podcast and you've gone through combat or some other trauma, right? And you don't know that you're carrying that rucksack. How do you prod to figure out if you got something there that you need to jettison?
That is an awesome question, and it's as individual as fingerprints. But here's the easiest way to say it is start asking the question. Just start asking it to yourself, to trusted agents. Where am I at? What's bothering me? I mean, I talked to you, we're developing a training that's called Trauma to Triumph. And it really is taking guys through this process. It's taking guys and basically saying, your trauma is your superpower, but you got to see it. And we're helping them see it. We're helping them accept it. We're helping them realize they're amazing the way they are. They're amazing because what they've done. They're amazing despite the ugly they have experienced or even been a part of, right? Because it's an experience. We're experiencing life, and life is for us, right? And those experiences can be built upon, or we can put them on top of us. It's our choice. It's our choice. So this training that we do has had really good success. Guys come in, and I've had some guys, I mean, people would say, I was to save my life. I was on my last. I was ready to I was in the middle of the gun. I call it being in a gunfight, where you're just focused on your front sight and you think that's all there is. You don't see the mountains, you don't see the earth, you don't see the landscape, you don't see space, you see the gunfight. That's all you see. The beauty's infinite, the gunfight's finite. But we confuse it, we flip it. We say that's gunfight is infinite and I can't get out of it. Right?
Yeah.
Wrong. It's wrong. Those mountains are there. That gunfight will end. Those mountains aren't going anywhere. That gunfight will stop. Right? So that's the train. That's what I'm getting ready to retire in March, and I'm going to be doing this stuff full time because, you know, the credo for combat search and rescue is that others may live. And I found a lot of pride in being part of that mission. That's a good mission. It's a great mission. We go pick up people, bring them home, isolated personnel, people who are wounded. We did casualty evacuation, totally different than blowing people up, but you know, kind of a full circle for me in mission, right?
Yeah.
I'll tell you another powerful incident with that is we would pick up soldiers that were wounded, but we'd also pick up locals that were wounded and local children that were wounded. And sometimes those local children were wounded by Apache shrapnel, right? Well, when that completes the circle for me, you know, I'm like, well, at least I'm doing this side of it now, you know?
Was that the driving force for you, Brian? Because you're right, very different mission sets. Was it intentional to kind of go the other direction now and try to help people in that way?
No, it really wasn't. And I'll be honest, I was more of a natural gunship pilot than I was a rescue pilot. I was better at it. I mean, I've become pretty decent at this one too, but I was more natural in the tactical application of a gunship. But it wasn't intentional. What happened is I had a very rough marriage, and you mentioned something. I don't know if I ever answered it. There's trauma that I had from and I used to say trauma, not that it's bad. Trauma is trauma, right? It's powerful. It's not bad. It's how you use it, right? It's how you use it. But I had trauma that built me from combat, a lot of it. Most of it built me. There's a couple of things that we talked about where I put the rucksack on. But the trauma from my caustic relationship that I had with a newlywed wife while I was gone was one that I carried with me that I wasn't prepared for. I prepared to employ against an enemy. I prepared through chair flying and other events, my mind to do certain things that just wouldn't be natural in any other setting. But I hadn't prepared to deal with a spouse that was 8,000 miles away from me, who was separated from me and also dealing with her own demons that had to, she had borderline personality disorder, had borderline personality disorder. And there was just this new, I didn't know how to deal with it. And that was building up. And that trauma, I wasn't putting in the right spots, right? That trauma was weighing me down, right? That trauma I was allowing to internalize that lightning bolt instead of stand on use it to light the city. So yeah, I mean, when I say trauma is trauma, it is. And I don't think I answered that question when you asked it the first time fully, because I go down these things. But
no, it's all of it.
But when I switched over, it was for her. It was the Air Force only deploys 3 to 4 months at a time. And so even though when I transferred over, we were combat search and rescue was in the most busy, hectic time of its history. We're going 3 on, 3 off, 3 on, 3 off, 3 on, 3 off, right? Which I thought it was a break. I just did 23 months. I was like, this is awesome, you know. The guys I was flying with were like, shut up, dude, this sucks. I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand. When I was flying the Apache and I saw your cohorts come in, like I worked with guys that I escorted then, you know, and they'd come back and like, oh, you're back too. And I'm like, no, I never left. And then they'd leave and they come back. Oh, you're back again too. And I'm like, no, I never left. Stop, you know, stop. And so that's why I transitioned over. But seeing that child with the shrapnel really just brought it home that, you know, this is just something that we've raised our hand and said we'll do. And we know that we're going to be doing things that nobody wants to do.
Yeah.
You know,
Man, before we kicked off, you asked me kind of how I got into this, and I said maybe we talk about it when we're on the air. And I think the way that you just put that is a pretty good segue to this, where when I was in the CIA, I knew I was going to be getting out, and I was trying to think of like, what am I going to do now that I have to grow up? And I think for me, I was like, if I could just sit down and talk to like Brian, guys like you every day, I'd be super happy. So I started going down that path, but I was deployed with the agency. So I was doing a war zone tour. I was away from the family again, you know, with training and other deployments. This is probably like 3.5, 4 years gone from wife, 3 kids. And I was thinking, man, if just one politician listens to this and they think for like 10 seconds longer next time they send somebody in, not to not send us in, but to just have perspective on what goes on when you say, yeah, let's go downrange, I would have felt it's all worth it. You know, and I didn't realize it would help people out and save lives, you know, help people deal with trauma. Like for sure, if someone's going to listen to this and get help, I'm very confident at least one person will hear this.
that's all we need.
Yeah, man.
I mean, more, come on, more, but
Yeah,
one's all we need.
man. All right. So you're busy. You're retiring in March. I did not know this. So that's coming fast, man. What are you feeling with that change coming?
Well, you know, I say I retire in March. I drop my papers in March, right? But I have 6 months of leave and then there's skill bridge. And so for all intents and purposes, I'm done working for the military in March. Right.
Yeah.
I'm super excited. I started to hit on it. The credo is that others may live. I've loved being part of that mission, and now I just want to do it this way. I want people to truly live. I want them to accept the traumas that they've experienced and grow from them and learn from them and find joy in them, which sounds hard when you talk about some ugly stuff, but that's how we live. That's how we live. So I want to continue that others may live. It's just going to be in a different vein. And I'm finding a lot of joy in doing it. So there's a little selfishness in it too, for me, right? Maybe there's a lot of selfishness.
Should be. Yeah.
But it is something that you just, like you said, one person changes because of something. You don't know your story is going to be the key to their lock, right? So throw the story out there, give as many keys as you can, and let's open some locks, you know?
Love it. Perfect, man. So Brian, I got 2 questions I ask everybody when we wrap up here. So one is there anything you carried with you when you were flying downrange that had sentimental value, maybe something that someone gave you that you just wanted to have on you?
You know, I'm not a sentimental guy. I really am not. So the answer is unfortunately, no, I did not. Now I'm older. Let's see if I take this off. I did bring some shrapnel back. Actually, I do have the shrapnel that took out my engine. I have that. I didn't carry it with me, but I do have that. I don't know if you can see. Can you see that?
Is it a dog tag, Brian? I see it. It's a picture.
It's a dog tag shape. But that's my son.
Yeah.
And I'm a solo father at this point. And this I don't ever not wear anymore, right? Has nothing to do with war, but it definitely is why I'm here. Like I have a lot of hats. I have some businesses. I have things that I do, you know, wear this hat, wear that hat. My dad hat's my favorite hat, and it's the hat that all the other hats serve, right? And so this would be the sentimental thing that I always have on. I didn't have it on then, but I didn't have him then. And I'm kind of grateful for that.
Yeah. I think it definitely changes the perspective when you're downrange with the kid for sure. And we do have a few people who are always like, nope, I always went in sterile, didn't have anything on me that was identifiable. So you're not the first to have that response.
People used to make fun of me. I would go so minimalistic. I told them I'm wearing my combat lingerie, right? Because I didn't go splinter cell because I'm a girthy individual, and there's not a lot of space in there. And I'm like, if this is gonna keep me from impeding me from doing my number one job, then the risk of going down and not having 500 rounds on my chest is worth it.
Even the vest that we would wear, I feel like, God, it's so bulky when you're in there just trying to get to the cyclic and move around. Okay. And then the last question, as you look back on the time that you spent in, and I know you're not quite out yet, but lights very close to the end of this tunnel. But as you look back on some of the trauma, the difficulty and sacrifice, would you go back and do it again?
Absolutely. I would.
Love it.
I would. Somebody has to, right?
For sure.
There's no other way to get certain experiences. And that's why I had to write that book. Those experiences aren't available for everyone, but everybody can learn from them. And they don't have to be in the military. They don't have to be, everybody can learn from those. And somebody's got to go get them,
Well said. I can't even add to that. So Brian, thank you so much for the time. We've got, we'll have links to obviously the book, Cleared Hot, and then Trauma to Triumph as well. So people can find this and you. Thanks a lot, man.
Appreciate you.
I hope you enjoyed that combat story. For me, it certainly hit close to home with the Apache background and commonality with Brian. A couple comments from users. The first is on the Chris Tonto Peranto interview on YouTube. It's from Patrick Hayes, and he says, I'm not an American. I have absolutely zero connection to the military, and I don't particularly agree with a lot of U.S. foreign policy, but these podcasts are just really top quality. You've mastered the art of letting your guests speak, which a lot of interviewers have never accomplished, and your guests are varied with different stories. Great job, Ryan. And I say this not to have anybody take aim at the comment on U.S. foreign policy. It's completely fine for people to have that perspective, obviously, but more so because what we try to do on this show is completely apolitical. Nobody's asking when you're in the foxhole and you're overhead about to take a shot on the enemy if you're one side of the aisle or not. You're just there to help somebody else, and I think that really came through with Brian, which is why I wanted to share this particular comment. We have another comment. This is on the Remy Adeleke interview. It's from Wayne Oriana. He says, I have nothing in common with today's guest, and yet I feel like he is telling me what my soul needs to hear. More than any other guest that you've hosted, Ryan, this one spoke to me. And I just think it's kind of amazing how people find the different connection points with a variety of our guests that we've had on, and I'm sure there will be people who do that with Brian's interview that we just listened to, who can find that connection with him and what he went through, and that it speaks to them as well. Thank you for taking the time to leave these comments. It does so much to help get our podcast out to more people when it is a crowded space to begin with, and helps other people hear these amazing stories. So thank you very much. You all stay safe.